just interested to see whether or not you also read the Jerusalem Post and some of the other less quote liberal Israeli publications and what's going on.
Yeah, the only other thing, the only Jewish publication that I is the weekly publication that comes out that they distribute, the magazine. What is that? The Jewish Journal, or?
Well, the Jewish Journal, of course, is the one that's on paper and on the internet, the local one. But anyway, I think it's worth looking at both sides.
Yeah. It is interesting. So just so we won't go too much, and we're on live streaming now as well and being recorded, is that the issues, I read a great article. By the way, if you haven't read the article by Rabbi Danny Gordis, I think Atlantic, I forget where it was. It's talks about democracy and his concerns not being a left-right issue. But I forget it was his article, somewhere else talked about all the different players in this, right? From Netanyahu himself, right? His own legal issues, to Derry. Do some of you know that issue of, right, the former head of Shas who was indicted and plea bargained and who made a plea deal to, Jack, you know this one? Made a plea deal not to be in politics.
Right, and then was in.
Right, for 7 years, I think. A year or two ago. So there's there. And by the way, the ultra-Orthodox parties who want a continued commitment, this is an interesting article I read, that they're concerned that the Supreme Court will uphold the obligation for Haredi to go into the army. And so they would like the ability for Knesset to be able to overturn that and to make sure that that Haredi ultra-Orthodox don't have to serve in the army. So there are so many pieces to this, this puzzle in terms of Israel and the judicial, questions that are coming up now. Let's is there a final thought you want to share?
I want to say the Shalom Hartman Institute is one that has both sides of the story and really good commentators and, rabbis and authors and whatever.
That's a great point. Hartman always turns out really great material. All right, we lost, looks like Jack Shulkoff maybe has some trouble connecting. Maybe he'll get back. Let's do our blessing, and then we'll start our study together. Lasok b'divrei Torah as a reminder. Here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher ishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lasok b'divrei Torah. All right, amen. All right, Jack, you're good now?
Yeah, I had both the live stream and the Zoom going at the same time, so it was like duplicated. So.
Yeah, they don't like to work together.
No.
Okay. All right, we're going to talk about blessings today, and specifically how many blessings. Why are there so many? And we'll talk theologically about that as well. Let's start and go to our source material. All right, let's start here. And Stan, you want to begin reading?
Certainly. And God will love you and bless you and multiply you. God will also bless the fruit of your body and the fruit of your land, your corn and your wine and your oil, the increase of your your
kind, your cattle, your
okay, and the young of your flock, in the land which God swore unto your fathers to give you.
So notice, by the way, love and bless you, which is just interesting. In the Hebrew, you'd recognize, a little bit of Hebrew, that ahevcha, right? And God will love you, uvarechecha, and God will bless you.
Yeah.
Right? And look here, and the hirbecha, and multiply you. Right. So I think it's the only place where you have this idea of love to blessing to being a great nation. So it's interesting how it's played out. And as well, it deals with, right, the increase of the land and all that you have and all the benefits that are seen as blessings. So now this week's portion is a very famous section. Go ahead, Stan, continue.
And you will eat and be satisfied,
Yeah.
and bless the Lord your God for the good land which God has given you.
Okay. And for anybody who knows,
Right.
Jackie, you got it? You're in and good? You okay, Jackie?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the source material, and I'm trying to get back so I can.
Yeah, so I have it on the screen if you want, but it's always online as well.
I know, I'm just trying to find it online. It's all good.
Okay. This verse is responsible for the rabbis, right? They derive from it.
Yeah.
What do they derive from it, George?
The one that you're 8:10, you mean that one?
Yeah.
Okay, that's in the Birkat Hamazon.
Birkat Hamazon,
Yeah.
right? So how do they get to the obligation of Birkat Hamazon from this? Ve'achalta,
Yeah.
when you eat,
Right.
v'tzavata, and you are sated,
Right.
uve'rachta, then they put, then you will bless.
Right.
So by the way, George, if you read it technically, if you follow the earlier verse as well,
Yeah.
that it really doesn't say that you have to bless. It is that you are blessed.
Ah.
Isn't that interesting? When you've eaten and satisfied, uberakta, well, here it says, and bless the Lord, but you can also say, and that you are blessed. So, but the rabbis want to see it as, right, as that you are, right, that you will bless.
Right.
So that is, by the way, this is where, honestly, where they derive the commandment for Birkat Hamazon, for the grace after the meals. And if you don't know, everyone might online here, that the blessing before we eat is very short. The blessings after we eat are very long. Okay. Anybody have a suggestion about why the blessing afterward is, why we put the short one at the beginning and the longer one at the end? Jackie?
So you can get to the food because you're probably hungry. And then when you're satiated, then you can give thanks for all of the food that's in your body.
That is, okay, that's one great suggestion, is that the idea is you want to eat, so you bless, and then you're going to do the longer one at the end. That makes sense. Good. Anybody else have any other suggestion about why it might make sense this way? There aren't many cultures. I think I heard one other that has a blessing after you eat, but most cultures don't have a blessing after you eat.
Right. Right.
What's the significance? Lauren, I see you thinking about it. Lauren, what's the significance of doing the blessings after?
Point.
Give thanks for what you've just done.
Gratitude for what you've been given.
Right.
It's a whole,
What you're going to have.
Lauren, to recite a blessing at the beginning,
Right.
okay, like, thank you. Oh, I'm so glad I have this. But how often, by the way, think about values of life and lessons. How often are people not appreciative for what they actually have?
Mm.
So it's after you've eaten, after you're full, by the way, Lauren, that now you go like, thank you, God, for those blessings. Important
Does
message.
it matter how much you've eaten? Doesn't even matter how much you've eaten.
Well, there is supposed to be, there's a question, by the way, I don't think it comes up in our section. We only do Birkat Hamazon when you have partaken technically of bread.
Right.
When you've done motzi at the beginning, it's considered a meal. And then Birkat Hamazon is, and there's actually, and I think it's in this section, as I remember, the part about blessings when you don't have meat, well, you don't have bread, but you eat other things. Any other thoughts about this before you go back? No, okay, because this is not the main.
This is interesting here.
Yeah, George, go ahead.
Yeah, this is very interesting because it's got the reversing vav, but some of it is in the future and some of it's in the past here. I mean, it's all the same structure, but some is, forward and some is backward.
Which
You
part?
will eat. Okay, that's we've got it as future, it doesn't reverse. And then it reverses. Oh, and then it goes to forward. And you will in the future eat, you will be blessed, you will be satiated, and then you will bless.
So by the way, so biblical grammar is very complicated because
Yeah.
because this technically is past tense, v'achalta.
Yeah.
and I'm not an expert in biblical grammar, please. Like I was lucky to pass that class in biblical school. But it's the future. It's actually becomes future.
It can.
Exactly. It can be.
Not always.
Not exactly. And that's why exactly why I barely passed the biblical grammar. All right. We're going to go to Mishnah and Gemara. Lauren, you want to read for us?
This Mishnah discusses the blessings recited.
Just so when we read, if you can, it's always good to read just nice and slow so everybody can hold on to every
This
word.
Mishnah discusses the blessings recited over the various foods. How does one recite a blessing over fruit? Over different fruits that grows on a tree, one recites. Who creates the fruits of the tree, with the exception of wine?
All right, so hold on. So, and you know that we won't do all of these, but many of you know that blessing, Borei Pri Ha'etz, right? When something grows from a tree. But wine's going to be an exception. By the way, in this, just so you'll know, the bold, the way this is structured, is the literal translation, and the italicized is the added words and thoughts to help you understand, right, to make sense of it, because Hebrew is so constricted, like it's so tight, that this helps understand better, Lauren, the whole meaning and context of it, okay?
Who creates the fruit? Although wine is produced from the fruit of the tree, due to its significance, its blessing differs from other fruits of the tree. Over wine, one recites, who creates the fruit of the vine. Over fruits that grows from the earth, one recites, who creates the fruit of the ground, with the exception of bread.
All right. So remember, there, like, even though you think of tree, you're like, well, there is a difference between tree and vine. But here, look, they're even doing fruit of the, I mean, certainly fruit coming from the ground is different than wheat coming from the ground. So they're trying to make these distinctions about where do we get our food from? And you all, right, what the blessing, Borei Pri Ha'adama, things that come from the ground, except bread has a very blessing of motzi. Okay, keep going.
Bread too is significant, and its blessing differs from the other fruits of the ground, as over bread one recites, who brings forth the bread from the earth. Over herbs and leafy vegetables one recites, who creates fruit of the ground. Rabbi Yehuda says that there is room to distinguish between fruits that grow from the earth, herbs and leafy vegetables. Although they are all fruits of the ground, since they have different qualities, the blessing on the latter is who creates various kinds of herbs.
Right. So this, so there's very specific blessings, and we'll talk about it maybe why later, over different types of food, herbs, and things like that. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. Mort, did you have a comment or no? No, you're good? Okay, just making sure. All right, Lauren, now we're going from Mishnah to Gemara in the Talmud.
Gemara. The Gemara returns to the issue at hand, noting that in any case it is difficult. What is unique about the common denominator between grapes and grain? That they possess an aspect of being offered upon the altar?
Right, so they're trying, and by the way, this is so hard for some people, Talmudic line. Any of you really just studied Talmud or no? Okay, George, you've studied a little bit of Talmud. Jack, you've done a little bit of Talmud, right? A little bit, Stan, a little bit. You know, Mort, if you're wondering why, you know, in terms of legal minds and those who study Gemara in terms of law, it's these little fine points of which Gemara, Talmud is famous about. How did it make fine distinctions and to develop into law? So I don't want you to get too lost on this. I just want to get a feel for it. And the biggest question I want you to just think about is different types of blessings, number of blessings, and what do blessings mean in general? All right, so I don't want you to get too caught up. And don't worry if you're like going like, I am so lost, don't worry. All right, keep going, Laura.
Rather, it is derived from the obligation to recite a blessing. A blessing upon the 7 species.
Right, there's 7 species in Israel that we have. Of wheat and barley and dates and 7 altogether that are seen as being a very different type of foods that have special blessing. All right, go ahead.
After the verse speaks of the 7 species, it states and you will eat and be satisfied, and then you shall bless. This is a paradigm. For all other foods, they do too require a blessing. Just as the 7 species are items from which one derives benefit and require a blessing, any item from which one derives benefit requires a blessing.
All right, so that's the important piece here. Anything you derive a blessing from requires a blessing. And then the question is going to be like, how do we recognize that blessing? How do we distinguish between blessings that we have? Right. So we're still building a case, and that we'll get to the larger philosophical question. Jack, you up for reading? You want to continue?
The sages taught in a Tosefta. One is forbidden to derive benefit from this world, which is the property of God, without reciting a blessing beforehand. And anyone who derives benefit from this world without a blessing, it is as if he is guilty of misuse of a consecrated object.
So, Jack, that's pretty strong, right? I mean, that's strong language about the first part is, you can't, is forbidden to derive benefit. But then it actually says, right, you're guilty of misuse of a consecrated, that the things that we have, Jack, are consecrated. And
it's not only the things that we have, it's everything.
So what do we recite blessings over, Jack? Eventually, maybe we'll get to it. I don't have it on my agenda, but we could. Like, is there anything that doesn't have a blessing that you derive a benefit from? So, but everything. Keep going, Jack.
The Gemara adds, what is his remedy? He should go to a sage. The Gemara is puzzled. He should go to a sage. What will he do to him? How can the sage help after he has already violated a prohibition?
Right, so Jack, so they're just, as you're going to see, this is a nonsense one coming up with the responses, but they're trying to figure, like, what happens if you don't know the blessing? Well, but you've already eaten of it, so what do? Go ahead.
Rather, Rava said, this is how it should be understood. He should go to a sage initially in his youth, and the sage will teach him blessings so that he will not come to be guilty of this type of misuse of a consecrated object in the future. Similarly, Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, one who derives benefit from this world without a blessing, it is as if he enjoyed objects consecrated to the heavens, as it is stated, the earth and all it contains is the Lord's, the world and all those who live in it.
So, Jack, that's what you said. Everything here is given to us by God. Everything is a blessing. By the way, it's interesting that we talk about things being a blessing and offering a blessing. Right? It's interesting that we use those two words in that way. Let's keep going, and then we'll.
What does?
Go ahead.
What does? I mean, when it says that you derive benefit from the world without a blessing, they're referring to, I presume, the actual act of blessing as a verb, right?
Yes.
Even though it's kind of, I guess it's kind of used as maybe a gerund here, but it just strikes me that so the actual act of blessing is that's what you have to do. Is that what it's saying?
Correct.
As opposed to something being a blessing.
Correct. That's what I was trying to make. Thank you for clarifying. Right. That you're supposed to offer a blessing. And that's why, but it's interesting. I'm saying, and that's why the confusion, we call things a blessing. God has given us blessings. And it makes it a little bit confusing when you have both those words used, which one it is.
That's what I'm getting at. I mean, one could say that, it's a blessing that we're able to study Torah on Zoom, and we shall be grateful for that, as opposed to saying, I'm going to give a blessing for the piece of bread that I have.
And by the way, so La Sokva Divrei Torah, that blessing is because, and by the way, there's differences between, so this is an important question. There's a difference between blessings of things that we enjoy and those of a mitzvot. Right? When we perform a mitzvah, we add asher kishan mitzvotav, that's Ivanu. So, like Jack, you made me think about when we study Torah, we add that lasok b'divrei Torah, who's commanded us, and so we acknowledge that we're fulfilling a mitzvah through that blessing. These are what we call blessings of enjoyment. Nehanim is really what they talk about. Okay, let's go Jackie first, and then Nancy.
Well, I think for me, if you back up a bit, the clarification was if you derive benefit from it, then you have to give a blessing or gratitude for it.
Okay, so so we're going to get into more different types of what we would say. What was the word you used? Benefit.
Benefit. Yeah. It said at the very beginning of that, one is forbidden to derive benefit from this world. So
All right.
if you're deriving benefit from a thing, then you have to be thankful for it.
Correct.
So
The blessings we've been talking about, Jackie, because what you've asked is the right question. I don't even think you're anticipating where we're going to get to in a moment, is that these are things you're actually, by and large, ingesting. Right. And that's how you're using benefit from it, right? You're ingesting and you're benefiting. But there may be another way of understanding the idea of enjoying benefit. All right. So I just want you to hold, because we're going to get to different types of blessings. By the way, Jack Nancy, I'm going to get to in a second, but you have here just the ending. Just read the last bit, because I just want to make sure we get through this. It's been stated already, Jack. Is Jack on the phone? Jack's on the phone. I'll read it here. Rabbi Levi expressed this concept differently. Rabbi Levi raised it in a contradiction. It is written, the earth and all it contains is the Lord's. And it's written elsewhere, the heavens are the Lord's and the earth he has given over to mankind. Everything given to us is from God, essentially. So that's why anything we enjoy in this world, we have to see as being from God and then to offer a blessing. So I just wanted to finish that, make sure. Nancy, go ahead.
Everything we get from God is a blessing, but I'm confused, and then you give a blessing for having a blessing.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to, right? Jack was talking about this as well. I'm trying to figure out. So in the Torah, right, in the portion Re'eh coming up, see that I've given to you this day, bracha uklala, I've given you a blessing or a curse. So Nancy, it's used in a way that life has blessings, good things. But it's also used as a sense of an act of acknowledging that blessing. Nancy, does that make sense?
Yeah, it
right?
does.
Right. By the way, the next section we're going to get to is going to address Jackie's question about what does it mean to benefit from something. All right. So Stan, go ahead.
I wanted to mention that we're also told that life should be a blessing, that our life should be a blessing. And that's you say the collective noun, or no way of putting it. The other thing I wanted to mention briefly is that we study Talmud in the class, but I want to put a pitch in for the Aliyah Talmud class.
Hamakom, yeah. Yeah, so we do have a Talmud class, right, that will be starting sometime. When is it starting, Stan? Do you know?
Beginning of September.
Beginning of September, being taught by Rabbi David Mendelson. It's been going on for years, but every year they start something new.
A wonderful community.
Yeah, it's a great, and welcome anybody who's interested, and even novices to it. So they're deciding now which masechet, which tractate to study. So we're still, Nancy, it's a good question, and it gets confusing that the same word is used, bracha, that it's a blessing, and to bless, and the blessing that you offer. All right, so I wish I could clarify it more for you, but I just can't. Let's go back to the next section, because I think it's to open up, and then we're going to look at some of the philosophical things about it. Here we go. Kathleen, would you like to read? Are you able to?
Sure. One that sees a place where miracles were done for Israel should say, "Blessed is the one who did miracles for our ancestors in this place."
So now it's not, Jackie, it's not ingesting something, but now there's an experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are a place, right, Shasanisim Lavotenu, B'makom hazeh, in this place. So there's a specific blessing for that. All right, keep going.
If one sees a place that had idol worship uprooted from it, say, "Blessed is the one who uprooted idol worship from our land."
Right, so it's a blessing for the elimination of idolatry. Keep going.
On comets and on earthquakes and on lightning and on thunder and on storms say, blessed be the one whose strength and might fill the world. On mountains and on hills and on seas and on rivers and on deserts say, blessed is the one who makes the works of the beginning.
Right, so there's different ones. So one, comets, earthquakes, lightning, there's one blessing. Mountains, hills, seas, rivers, there's another blessing. And now Rabbi Yehuda, the last one.
One who sees the great sea says, blessed is the one who made the great sea, only if he sees it occasionally.
All right.
On-
So hold on. So now the Mediterranean, if you see that, it's another, right, another blessing. So what are we to make sure, what are we to make of this? Right, it's not ingesting something, you're not getting direct benefit, but
I think it's to help us be more aware of the world and increase that sense of consciousness so that we're constantly in the present and appreciating what exists around us and noting that so that we're not oblivious and trample on it in some way. And it
Beautiful.
helps with gratitude.
very nice. Okay, Jack, did you have another approach?
Well, I mean, I think if you see anybody who's seen the ocean, you do get a benefit when you see the ocean. At least I do.
I don't know.
So the benefit is what, Jack? Articulate that.
I think that when I see the ocean, I see beauty and scale and something larger than myself and cool air.
All right, great. So, and you bet there's benefit from that.
Absolutely. I feel better when I see the ocean.
I love it. All right, Mort, and then Lauren.
It's by blessings being derived to cover your entire actions and what takes place. It really places the human being in sort of a humble state, one of humility, because you have to acknowledge that you're just really insignificant compared to what has placed you here and the world you're in.
And so to articulate then, right, is that these moments help you recognize your place in the universe, and they're a moment of spiritual recognition. Right? Is that what you're saying?
And a sense of humility that
right. Good. And I
can't
can't
be a big shot,
ahead.
you know.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love that thought. Yeah, Lauren, you had your hand up?
Well, you know, what he just said made me change what I was going to say about the ocean, because we were on a cruise one time and we ran into a storm. So you're on the ocean and it's not this beautiful thing anymore. And so what he just said, it's like suddenly you feel very you know, you just want to get off you just want to get off alive, and it's totally out of your control because you're the boat, as big as the cruise ship is, it's rocking and the room is rocking and things are flying, and the ocean doesn't seem so beautiful at that time. So it's a blessing, you know. So someone just said something about a blessing has to be something you benefit from.
Right.
So, you know, yes, you could benefit from the ocean, but at that particular time, I did not benefit from the ocean until it calmed down. But then, like Mort said, it's like I realized, like, I was just this insignificant passenger on an insignificant cruise in the middle of the ocean, and somebody other than me was in charge. So, you know.
That's beautiful. And I think that, right. But a blessing, the point is, a blessing can change a moment, right? And from an experience to either a blessing, awareness, or something else, Lauren. That's what I heard you say.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the power of the universe, right? How it works and everything is all part of that. I love, Lauren, that was so beautiful. All right, let's go back. We're gonna go to the next section. Because there's more blessings. Of course there are. Who was reading?
I was reading.
Okay, Kathleen, keep going.
Where were we exactly?
On rain, rain.
Day, say, blessed is the one who is good and does good. And
So
on
by the way, so by the way, rain and good news have the same blessing. Because by the way, rain was good news.
Mhm.
Hatov v'hametiv, who's good and metiv and brings goodness.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
And on bad news, say, blessed are you, the true judge.
Now, many of you know this, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet,
Yeah.
usually associated with death, but really technically it's any bad news, right? And by the way, this is the most complicated one. I'm going to take a moment to talk about this one. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet.
Mhm.
Blessed are you, the right true judge. What's supposed to be the significance of reciting that blessing when something bad happens?
I think in part it recognizes that we're not always in control, and to make that differentiation from when you are in control, but you have, and when you're not, and what you have to sort of radically accept. As this is happening for some reason, I may not understand it.
Okay, all right, good, Jack.
Yeah, I would just, that's the same. I'm always troubled by that, because there's also a sense of when you say that, A, it's something to say, so it makes it a little easier. But two, if you really think about what's saying, it's almost one of these things like, well, we can't know why somebody died, but it must have been for the best. And I don't think anybody really believes that.
Hello. Let's go Stan, Bob, and then Ilan. And then Jackie. Stan, go first.
Well, what told the Emet is truth in a capital T sense. Something more than just the language. To me, it means going to another dimension of something that's outside of space and time, but there's another truth.
Okay, good. All right, Bob.
Well, I'm troubled by the prayer because it implies to me that this image of God as being the great puppeteer
Yeah.
who sets all things in motion, and it's
Yeah, it is hard. Baruch Dayan Hamet, right? Blessed is the judge, right? Just righteous judge. Bob, just I say that at a funeral.
Yeah.
It's because that's part of the kriya, the tearing. And I never translate it into its English, right? Because Jack, I just can't. I can't say to somebody I'm standing there, right, who's died, and say, God is the righteous judge, and there must be a reason for why this person died at this stage.
Then why say it in Hebrew?
Yeah.
because no one understands it.
Well, but I mean that's obviously, but I just, that's like troubling to me that we can't, that we say something like that, we put it in Hebrew because nobody really understands it, and therefore it even if you do, it diminishes the reality of what you're saying, and yet we say it because of the tradition, but that's problematic.
Yeah. So by the way, this difference between conservative Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism. Reconstructionist Judaism would say, let's just change those prayers to reflect what we're doing. And Jack, you know that. They change, right, prayers in the liturgy. They don't say Asher Bachar Banu, God who's chosen us, because they reject that idea of chosenness. We generally consider movement has taken of creating new blessings by way which we could. Not changing too much, but trying to change the meaning of it. But Jack, I don't say that lightly, because I take your challenge and criticism that it seems inauthentic, and maybe a little bit hypocritical even, maybe. I'll take that. Ilan.
We have the statement in Iyov saying that Elohim Natan ve'Elohim Lakach Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. Now, we were talking about the benefit, and this is too narrow, too selfish. We have to understand that the rain is, to some farmer, it's a blessing, and to another farmer, it's a disaster. Depend where you are. We have to bless everything, also the good and also the bad. And Iyov asked, why did you punish me?
Yeah.
And God answered him, shouted at him, and said, Who are you to ask me a question? What do you know?
Yeah.
You are just a selfish little temporary creature that think that there is an Aesopus tale, or how you call it, that a frog was sitting on a mountain and she was asking a flood to come so that she will have a wet pond. And God asked her, do you want me to flood the whole world just because you are sitting up here on the little hill? Pick up your back and walk down to the water.
So Elon, I know that I understand. Sorry to interrupt you. What you said is very significant, and I challenge myself in terms of my theology in the world by saying, if you're going to thank God for the blessings, shouldn't you also then acknowledge the hardships? So being consistent, Elon, theologically, I think is a great challenge, Elon. But I will also tell you, Jack, you'll say, you'll laugh again maybe or be disappointed. But when I do, I never translate it exactly. God gives and God takes. I say life is given and life returns unto the natural order. Because again, I'm still troubled by that theology about God taking. And it's, Elon, it's just
I see it as a kind of a childish. A child likes to get. He never likes to give anything. Just give me, give me, give me. And a culture of give me, give me, give me is not a society that will sustain itself.
I agree with you. I agree with you. When Jack, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna share with you a personal moment. One of the most difficult moments theologically I ever had in my life is I went to a funeral many years ago of a teenage boy. Went to school with my kids, who died as a car accident in which he were doing this like car surfing or something, where they lean out the window, right? And he, it hit another car and he was killed.
Yeah.
And the funeral was officiated by an Orthodox rabbi. Mm-hmm. And his message, by the way, remember, think there's like 100 kids there, right? 115, 16-year-olds. And he says, this should be a lesson to everybody. Listen to your parents, right? He went out on Shabbat. This happened, and this is what happens. And the kids were going like, oh my God. Like, this is the world, Elon, this is how the world works. Like, we're going to be punished for those kinds of things by God. We had to, as rabbis and educators, had to undo that really, really painful and really harmful theological message that was given that day. So I struggle with that. And I share that, it was a very personal moment. Jack, you want to respond to that first, and then Jackie? And I want to go back to the stuff that the Lord, everybody wants to talk about. Well, you know what? Maybe we'll sit here for a while with it. It's okay. Jack, go ahead.
This is, I share your struggle, and I remember that tragedy. But it strikes me that so much of our texts relate to reward and punishment. We see it throughout the Torah. We see it throughout the Talmud. I know Mort often comments on the kind of absurdity of it, and yet it is so much part of our tradition, which, as you said, can't be reconciled with what we believe and what we think we know about the world. And so does that raise a question about the validity of a tradition that is so based on reward and punishment?
So it's a great point, especially this week's Parsha, Ekev. We have the second paragraph of the Shema, V'hayim Shemoah, which is one of those problem texts for us, Jack. Right? If you believe and are good, then God will reward you. If you disobey, then God's going to punish you. So I think it is how do we reinterpret that theology? So what I let Jack, I go to in those moments that we understand God differently in each generation. Some of you may know this is the answer given about the Amidah. Why does it begin? Right? Baruch atah Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov. Why not just, right? The God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. Why not just say Elohei Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov? A wonderful answer given is in each generation, God was different. The God of Abraham was different than the God of Isaac, different than the God of Jacob. They knew God differently. So, Jack, I think theologically, we know that we understand God differently. Maimonides, right, would say, I love quoting, paraphrasing, that, you know, if there's a conflict between what we know about science and natural law and God, if there's a conflict, we have to change our idea about God. So Maimonides owned what you're just talking about, Jack. But it is, and Mort, I don't want to go to Mort for now, but Mort talks about this all the time. How can we believe in this kind of God? And I'm going to channel my inner Mort. Like this, like what kind of, like, and that's, so I don't buy that theology, Jack. So let me go Jackie, and then we'll hit a couple, and then Stan, Nancy, Lauren, and we'll see what we have time for. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll try to be brief and.
Thank you.
Okay, so you know a little bit about my life, but I've dealt with abuse and trauma and loss and grief and illness and chronic illness and accidents and so much crap in my life. And people say, wow, you're really strong. You made it through all of those things and it's made you stronger. I'm like, I'd rather have not gone through those things to be this strong. But one of the things that I tell my kids, I tell everybody, it's one of the mantras is everything is always working out for me and everything is always in perfect timing. How does it get better than this? Because for me, looking at all of the stuff that I've gone through and continue to go through, literally, I got a text at the beginning of this that my son was just rear-ended. If everything's working out, this is going to be fine, right? For me, it's a matter of faith because I realized a long time ago, I have no control over this life, that God has more control over it than I do. And so I see myself as being on the boat, but God in that eagle's nest, if not higher, being able to say, this is what's on the horizon. You can't see what's coming, but I know this is going to work out. So just have faith. So there you go.
So I love what you've done in terms of, and the rabbis, I think, did this also in every generation, Jack, and they did it in different ways, is trying to reconcile theology with the real world. Yeah. And they're truly troubled by all that. You know, Jack, you know that famous story, in the Talmud about the boy, whose father tells him to climb the tree and to shoo the mother bird away, and he falls and he dies. And that's part of the story of going into Pardes of how can you're following two mitzvot of the greatest order that say that your day will be lengthened to honor your parents and to shoo away the mother bird, and the kid, like, how can that happen in a world where God governs with certain laws of righteousness and good? And so they've always responded, Jackie, to try and figure that out. They just had a different answer to it than we would, because just based on who they were and the time they lived. Let's go on to who is next. Did I call? Stan.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that we study Torah, but we don't necessarily say this is literally. We can say this is metaphor. I think we can do the same in a sense with our tradition and some of the prayers, in the sense that this is the literal meaning, but it's not what it really intends to convey. So we can look at it more as a metaphor and a lesson. And the last thing is the part about our lives being a blessing. And, we have to thank everyone who came before us for, the world that we have. We wouldn't be where we are if it was just for the people that are here today.
Yeah.
So, and that's part of the process. It's part of life. It's part of God. It's part of whatever you want to call it. You can't necessarily express it in words.
All right. Thank you, Stan. It's beautiful. Lauren? Please.
So, you were saying something that personally happened to you. So about 20 years ago, when I was teaching, a little girl in my class, 6 years old, fell out the window and died. And she was Catholic, and we went to her funeral. And how do you explain a 6-year-old dying? There's no rhyme or reason for it. And so the priest, and all the little 6-year-olds from my class were at the funeral. And the priest explained that the angels wanted to learn how to rollerblade and invited her up to heaven to teach them how to rollerblade. And I was so angry. I mean, I sat there thinking, what is the matter with this priest? How does he explain that death to the family, to the children, to me? I mean, just don't say anything. Oh, yeah, wanted to learn how to rollerblade. So Josephina was invited to heaven to teach them how to rollerblade.
And Lord, those are different theological approaches. Only the good die young, right? God needed them. The angels need them. Those are all answers that try and provide comfort, but for many of us, are a little bit hollow. I gave a sermon one time about all of that, and it's very problematic. And I agree with you.
The interesting thing is the family fell apart. The parents got divorced. And many of the children from that class, I followed them along. They've all had a lot of emotional issues. In fact, I won't mention, but one of the little girls is Temple Members Rabbi. And she was friends with this little girl the day before she died. They had a fight. And she said, I never want to see you again. And she never saw her again. In fact, I remember her at her funeral going up there and the mother reading the letter to them. These kids had this emotional problem because, who wants to be told? Anyway, it just was.
So our text, I want to go back for a little bit. Our text keeps going on with different sections, like different blessings that we have. I'm looking at the text in front of me. I don't have to put on the screen. When you buy a new house, you get new vessels. Anytime you get something new, what are you supposed to recite? What blessing?
Shechianu.
Shechianu, right.
Rabbi, may I make a comment?
Sure, please.
My son lost a bracha contest in Hebrew school with Rabbi Shochet, when the question was, what's the blessing for a new suit? And he didn't know it. So some of my relatives said, we got to buy him a new suit so he would learn it, But that's what he stumbled on, at Shechianu. So remember that one.
Yeah, so we have all these blessings. I'm going to go thank you, George, for sharing. I'm going to go this last part.
Yeah.
And Eileen, will you read number 5?
Am I on?
You're on. You're live.
Okay. A person is obligated to bless upon the bad, just as they bless upon the good. As it says, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all that you have.
Right, and that's in Meodecha. It's weird sometimes translate with all your might. They like all you have. So they're actually saying that this obligation to bless the bad and the good comes from this verse of Ve'ahavta. How is that? You're going to tell us right now, Eileen?
It says, with all your heart, with your two inclinations, with the inclination of good and the inclination of evil, and in all your soul, even if he takes your soul, and with all that you have, with all your money. How does money get in there?
Because you're supposed to, right? Because you're supposed to dedicate to God, right? You love God with all your heart, soul, might.
Yeah.
This is how some will interpret what the distinction is between those 3 things. Go ahead. Alternatively.
Alternatively, with all that you have, with every measure that is measured for you, thank him very much.
Right. So that's why. So one interpretation is you dedicate in terms of you love God. By the way, the idea, Eileen, of Hidor mitzvah, the beautification of a mitzvah.
Yeah.
So, if you can buy a nice etrog, if you can buy a nice Kiddush cup, you do that. And so those are ways of honoring God. But here, Jack, it's interesting, right? They're trying to find biblical proof about blessing the bad as well. That's how, it's so contrary to human nature that by the way, they don't feel a need to bless to explain it why you have to bless the good. Isn't that interesting? But to bless the bad, they've really got to try and prove that point. If you don't know why the lavavcha, do you guys remember? Anybody remember? Right? There's 2 bets in there, right, George?
Yeah, that's if it's one, okay. If there's 2, it implies both sides of your heart.
Right, and so that's their proof text for the Yetzer HaTov and Yetzer Hara is that word lavavecha.
Yeah.
Lavavcha. Nancy, you had your hand up.
That's like when somebody passes away that has no hope, for any means of existence. We always say it was a blessing. So that's kind of the other half of the spectrum and relates to what we just read.
It is interesting what you raise also. Sometimes when somebody passes, it is a blessing. I just did a funeral in which, 97 years old, suffered extensively the last 6 months. And it was a blessing, right? That this person they had lived a full life, no desire to live longer, and they were out of pain now. But I will tell you, by the way, when you talk about responses and Lauren, like how we respond to people about things, even in that sense, in that case, I would never say to somebody that her passing was a blessing. I always wait for the mourner to be able to admit that. Right? Because we can never presume. Right? Sometimes they don't think it's a blessing yet. They haven't gotten there in their grieving process. And so I just share that with you in terms of knowing. I always, I'll begin to ask questions. Were they in a lot of pain? How are they doing? Did they retain their dignity? And it's if they eventually will say, you know what, honestly, her passing was a blessing, then I know that they're there, but not everybody's there yet. Let's get, here's the essence. There's an important piece, and then there's a reading I want to do at the end here about blessings as well. Mort, are you able to read this little section of Menachot? It was taught. No, you just muted yourself, Mort. You were unmuted, now you're muted. There you go.
It was taught in a
Baraita.
Rabbi Meir used to say, a person must bless 100 blessings every day, as it says, now Israel, what does God what? Now Israel, what does God?
It should be asked. It's a typo. It's a typo. Ask.
Yeah.
Don't read ma rather. I don't know.
Right.
What is the difference?
So here, look at in the Hebrew, the last line where I have the pointer, Ve'ata Yisrael, and now Israel, Ma Adonai Elohecha shoel mimcha. What does God, right, or the Lord ask of you? This word ma, what they're saying is don't read it ma, but put an aleph in there. If you put an aleph in there, the word is mea. Eileen, I know you're not like, what are they, on drugs again? Right? Mea, that 100 blessings. So
Isn't that enough blessings?
we're Jewish tradition, supposed to recite 100 blessings a day.
That's easy. Yeah.
Right. So by the way, George, I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
You're almost there.
So this is, right?
Yeah.
If you go the blessings of 3 services every day,
Yeah.
of Torah study, of putting on a talit and tzitzit in the afternoon, without even eating. And by the way, every time you eat, there's 1 at the beginning and there's 4 at the end, so 5 more. So you get 90 just from doing all this.
Yeah.
But this was what they talked about in terms of being able to recite. And here's the last part I want to get to. This is an interesting part. Let's read one more for me, more.
All the blessings may be recited in any language, provided one recites a translation of the text ordained by the sages. A person who changes that text fulfills his obligation nonetheless, since he mentioned God's name, his sovereignty, and the subject of the blessing, although he did so in an ordinary language.
You're allowed to, by the way, fulfill the mitzvah of prayer with a translation into whatever is your language. There's a couple exceptions like Birkat Kohanim and other things that are supposed to be done in Hebrew, but overwhelmingly any language that you do them in. Let's go to Rav Kook. All right. Let's have Bob, did you read? Did you read yet? You want to read?
One must understand that all of the enjoyments in the world have not actualized their identities unless they are used for the type of enjoyment that leads to ethical happiness, which is the knowledge of God. Therefore, one who benefits from the world without making a blessing and uses these things solely for the purpose of physical enjoyment is changing the identity of these things. It is actually parallel to using that which is consecrated to God, because those are things which are poised to help a person achieve spiritual completion. And instead, one is minimizing their value and using them for physical pleasure by misappropriating them and changing their identity. The sin of Me'ileh is fundamentally that of making a change.
Right. And so, isn't it, right, Bob, that's a powerful way of looking at it, right? That these are supposed given by God to impact us spiritually, and to think about it just physically is actually to misappropriate what these experiences in the world are about. Let's go to Abraham Joshua Heschel, who's always a favorite for many of us. Go ahead, Bob.
The sense for the miracles which are daily with us, the sense for the continual marvels is the source of prayer. There is no worship, no music, no love, if we take for granted the blessings or defeats of living. No routine of the social, physical, or psychological order must dull our sense of surprise at the fact that there is a social, a physical, or a psychological order. Wow. We are trained in maintaining our sense of wonder by uttering a prayer before the enjoyment of food. Each time we are about to drink a glass of water, we remind ourselves of the eternal mystery of creation. Blessed be thou by whose word all things come into being. A trivial act and a reference to the supreme miracle. Wishing to eat bread or fruit, to enjoy a pleasant fragrance or a cup of wine, on tasting fruit in season for the first time, on seeing a rainbow or the ocean, or noticing trees when they blossom, on meeting a sage in Torah or in secular learning, on hearing good or bad tidings, we are taught to invoke his great name and our awareness of him. Even on performing a physiological function, we say, blessed be thou who healest all flesh and doest wonders.
Does everybody know that there's a blessing after you go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
Right? That it talks about, thank you, God, basically, that my body works the way it should, that my orify, in fact, work the proper way. And blessed art thou, God, who heals all flesh and does wonders. And all these things, by the way, the rainbow one harkens back and mentions Brit, the covenant of the rainbow given to Noah. Go ahead, just read the last paragraph.
This is one of the goals of the Jewish way of living, to experience commonplace deeds as spiritual adventures, to feel the hidden love and wisdom in all things.
And so how do we do that? We can talk about living an elevated life. You know, Jackie, this is your bailiwick. This is it. How do you do it? In the Jewish tradition, it was by having blessings for everything, by acknowledging that a moment, right, can be taken from the mundane to the holy by acknowledging that moment as being a holy moment. That's why we have these blessings, not just things that we physically, in fact, you know, according to Rav Kook, you're diminishing, Bob, the value of them. Spiritually, when you think it's just physical, no. It's all about spiritual and connection and awareness, and that's what brings us to this holy status. So this week, that's right, the section Madam, what does God ask you? Shoel Mimcha, 100 blessings a day that we should be spiritually attuning ourselves to feel that greater sense of awe in the world. Always a pleasure to study with you. Rabbi Cameron will be next week. I will actually be away next Shabbat. My daughter is getting married up in Seattle.
So tough.
So that's it. Oh, no, three married, right?
Sorry?
That's the third one getting married, right?
That's the third, the oldest and the third one. The oldest and the third one, that is correct.
The only girl.
My only girl, that's right. You've known her for her whole life, Lauren.
All right. Are you performing?
I am not. I'm going to be dad. I'm going to be the dad and just enjoying. So she's going to do a little bit more creative in terms of what she's wanted to do. So you got to let your children be your children. To quote Khalil Gibran. I will be here this Shabbat. We have the Neshama service and we have Shira. If you haven't joined us before, we're together for the Torah service. You're always welcome. But let me wish you all Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shalom.
Shalom.
Bye-bye.